Actually, skipping back to paracetamol, there was a study that came out in rodents that shows that it decreases your empathy centers in your brain. We wonder why kids are acting with less empathy. Every kid's getting Nurofen. Okay? For every degree higher your temperature goes when you're sick, you get something like a 10-15% reduction in bacteria and viruses. What does your doctor do? Switches that important mechanism off. There's a massive study in the Philippines that showed that kids, when they had paracetamol, along with their vaccinations, I can't remember which one, had some incredible 5 times, 6 times higher incidence of autism. Okay? Paracetamol is recommended with vaccines in Australia. They know this stuff. This information is out there. So they're still recommending stuff that's harmful for us. If you want to take a bit of a deep dive, look at a fellow, Anatoly Fomenko. Tells us about our timeline and our history. I'm fairly convinced that at least 300 years have been added to our timeline, if not 1,000. Okay? He's a Russian fella. He's got a team, a massive team behind him. He's broke down all these records and historical data, which basically shows that a lot of our history is just made up. Which parts? I don't know. So they lie about everything. So it's easy to see that they're going to lie about our health. Max Egan, presume you heard of old Max. He does some good work. Yeah. He talks about very, very, very correctly about all that he built. You know, where we had boatloads of convicts rocking up to Australia, and all of a sudden they have all these massive machines to cut stone and throw all these buildings up in a space of 50, 60 years. If you look at the ergonomics of making that happen, it is impossible. It's impossible. We need to start looking around. The pyramids. Look at these massive, impossible structures that look like batteries. They've got harmonics. They've got resonations. There was all that technology. They just keep it from us. The world fairs. Anybody looking into that? It's just incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. Yeah. Who believes that that oil and petrol from prehistoric fossils, hey? Can I swear? Bullshit. Just that simple. Yeah, they want us hooked into energy. They wing for energy. Keeps us trapped. Water. Anybody heard of primary water? Guy, it's under the ground. They keep it from us. And then, if we want to take again, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. If we look at some historic stuff like the Talmud, they spell it out in there. Guys, or short for Gaiam, it's cattle. It says cattle. They're allowed to steal from us. They're allowed to rape our women. It's not a sin. Okay? Kids. What are kids? Absolutely. What's goat a reference to? Goat, somebody said. Baphomet. There's a big satanic link to this stuff, I think. And in every society, we have these literary figures. The obvious one in England is Shakespeare. Big doubt as to whether he existed at all. He was a mechanism to shape our language to the language of deception, to change the meaning of words, which I've heard Austin talk about. Interesting, even the name, Shakespeare. Shake a spear, shake a wand, castles, spelling. Okay, there's an element of magic and energy to a lot of this stuff, which if you told me this, 5, 6 years ago, I would have laughed. Now I'm seeing things differently. And if anybody doesn't believe me, I suggest another look. Okay, how are we doing for time? Actually, we're doing really nice. So, the other thing which you kind of stumble across is these sinister characters, okay, who are lauded, who are heralded, who are put in these pedestals. I'm going to throw a few names at you. Edward Jenner, the grandfather of vaccines. I think he's on one of the bills in America. You know, this guy, it's been proved that a lot of his work was fraudulent. He just made it up to sell vaccines. They were having vaccine issues and vaccine riots and vaccine demonstrations in the late 1800s. It's been going on since then. Okay? They're trying to have mandatory vaccines in the early 1900s in England and in America. This is not their first go at it. Louis Pasteur. He was quite an obnoxious man, apparently. Okay, again, everything goes back to Mr. Pasteur. But some of his family hated him. I think it was his nephew who released his dog. And he used to bring arsenic with him to make goats sick to prove contagion. The guy was a fraud. Stole a lot of his work from a fellow called Beauchamp. They're both French guys. They had to identify one of the biggest industries was the wine industry. So there was huge interest in trying to keep grapes well. And Beauchamp had a lot of different ideas. And Pasteur stole a lot of his work. You don't hear about Beauchamp. Freud, Sigmund Freud, sexual deviant. Again, his diary, grandfather of psychology. He was writing letters saying, I must rush back to Germany lest my clients be. This is our medical system. One of the most people that just about nobody's heard of, a fellow called Edward Bernays. Anybody heard of him? Fantastic, a few people here. Look into this guy. Again, feel free to email me and I'll give you these notes so you don't have to remember so much. But Bernays, incredibly harmful and destructive person for what we see going on in the world. Freud's nephew. He was the guy who got advertising about women smoking. He had a big hand in the feminine movement, 1900s. Okay, he got breakfast cereal as the most important meal of the day. There's an interesting little trip. Breakfast cereal. I'm pulling this from the memory bank, so I might be a little bit off, but Anne something or other, she was one of these prophets for one of the religious groups in America, Seventh-day Adventists, I think it was. And she, at 17 or 18, she started having visions. She was so important, so they gave her to record everything she said. His name happened to be Mr. Kellogg. Okay, and he invented breakfast cereal because he wanted to switch off the sexual desire in males. Because they knew at that time, even back then, this is back in the 1920s and 30s, that sugar poisons us. Okay, and they're still selling it to us. And we're buying it because it's highly addictive. So yeah, Bernays, he's the guy who had doctors in white coats in his books. He says that doctors will be the new religion. Okay? A lot of his work, he had a book, I think, called Propaganda for the Masses. He was responsible for over 2 or 3 different countries. A lot of his work we're seeing happen right now. This guy was a very, very evil and insidious fellow. And then on the other hand, we got people we've never heard of. Claude Bernard, this guy is responsible for what the background people for what we now call terrain theory. And my feet are still a little bit in both camps, but I'm probably 80% towards the fact that I don't think that we can pass on bugs and viruses anymore. With smallpox, the medical system grabbed a hold of very, very sick people, and they offered prisoners in America early release if they went through these experiments. So they had these guys sick with smallpox coughing in these prisoners' faces. They couldn't infect them. Then they started rubbing the secretions into the prisoners. They couldn't infect them. Then they couldn't infect it. Time after time after time, there are experiments that are being run show that the way we're accurate. If things are so contagious, why is it that just one person in a house has a cold and other people don't get it? Why does only 2 or 3 kids in a school get measles? Okay? To me, the things like colds and flus are detox mechanisms. It's very, very important to know that. Who else have we got here? So, yeah, Weston A. Price. Incredible, incredible guy. This guy was a dentist back in the early 1900s. And his work holds so true today. And he looked into twins. And what he noticed was you had this epidemic around those times in America of all these people going to the dentist to get every tooth ripped out and then have these really old kind of dentures put in. He wanted to know why. And the information that he came up with, you can still read today, was just quite profound. And he looks at hydrogenated oils, he looks at sugars, He looks at things like sunlight. He looks at things like out in the open, exercise, all these things. Every single thing that he wrote more than 100 years ago now stands true now. We don't hear about this guy. People like Steiner, Schauberger, I suggest people have a look at some of their work. They talk about water, which we'll be covering later. Massara